In the beginning, the protagonist was being violently attacked by her own father. His voice, filled with anger, reverberated through the room as he yelled that she should never have been born. Each blow he delivered was accompanied by spiteful words, labeling her a worthless, colorless being. As the protagonist cried and bled, she could only stammer out apologies, begging for forgiveness for simply existing. Her father continued to berate her, asking if she had any idea how much shame her presence brought him. Barely able to speak through the pain, she kept repeating her apologies. Just then, her sister appeared, her demeanor bright and carefree. Her father's mood shifted instantly, and he greeted her with warmth, calling her his angel. Concerned for her sister, the girl gently asked their father not to be too harsh. In a display of supposed affection, she embraced the protagonist, her innocent expression showing concern. She reminded their father that, despite being colorless, her sister was still a valued member of the family. The father's smile softened as he praised his younger daughter for her kindness, admitting that perhaps his punishment had gone too far. He hugged her, expressing his love, which she warmly returned. As she left, she turned back to her sister with a seemingly caring remark, asking her to take care of herself. The protagonist could only look on in disbelief as her sister walked away, but her momentary relief was cut short when her father yanked her hair roughly. Sneering, he told her she should be grateful to Morella, for she was the only reason she was still alive. With another painful tug, the protagonist sobbed out a tearful acknowledgement, admitting that everything she had, even her life, was thanks to Morella. Her father, frustration evident on his face, finally exited the room. The protagonist remained behind, her body trembling as she gazed at her reflection, tears streaming down her face. She silently questioned the purpose of her existence, wondering why she had even been born. She reflected on the world they lived in, where the creator had used a golden aura to bring about all kinds of phenomena. The descendants of this power, the nobility, were able to manifest red, blue, green, or yellow auras by the age of 5. The aura they possessed signified their nobility and value. But she, unlike others, was born without an aura, colorless. Those without an aura were treated with contempt, regarded as inferior. Her father, who held rigidly to aristocratic ideals, could never forgive her for being born colorless. Though he wouldn't kill her, fearing the damage it could do to his reputation, he vented his anger on her through beatings whenever he was in a bad mood. Today had been no different, or so she thought. Meanwhile, her sister Morella had been observing from a distance. Seeing Raju alone, she entered the room, her expression innocent, her voice sweet. She asked if her sister was all right. Raju, visibly uneasy in Morella's presence, could only offer a hesitant response. Unfazed, Morella smiled and explained that she had brought medicine for her. She urged Raju to take it, mentioning how people at the party earlier that day wouldn't stop gossiping about her colorless nature. With a tone of false concern, she told Raju not to be too hard on their father. Opening a bottle, Morella poured some liquid onto a spoon and chuckled softly. She remarked that she figured Raju would have difficulty moving after what had happened. Holding the spoon up, she told her sister to open her mouth and say ah as she prepared to give her the medicine. Raju turned her face away, refusing to take it. Morella's voice hardened as she demanded to know why she wouldn't drink it, insisting that she would feel better once she did. But Raju stood her ground, quietly repeating that she didn't need it. Frustrated, Morella pressed further, her tone growing sharper. She reminded Raju that she had gone through the trouble of sneaking the medicine past their father and demanded that she take it. When Raju's patience finally snapped, she knocked the spoon out of her sister's hand, shouting at Morella to stop. The spoon flew from Morella's hand, clattering loudly against the floor. Raju instantly realized what she had done, her heart racing as panic set in. Her voice, small and trembling, whispered apologies, but Morella's face darkened with fury. She sneered, vowing to teach Raju a lesson. Without a second thought, Morella kicked Raju harshly in the face, laughing cruelly as she watched her sister cry out in pain. Her smile was twisted, and through Raju's sobs, Morella mocked her, calling her pathetic and unsightly. Raju, with tears streaming down her face, could only ask, "Why? Why do you always treat me like this?" Morella merely shrugged, as though the answer were obvious. She coldly reminded Raju that those without an aura weren't nobles, a fact that everyone knew. As Morella unleashed her own vibrant aura, her face contorted with malice, and she questioned aloud whether there was any reason to be kind to someone who didn't even deserve to exist. Reiju's mind drifted to memories of the past. Once, she had been loved. Up until the age of 5, everything had been different. When she failed to manifest an aura by that age, most people around her had still treated her normally, assuming she was just sick or an exception. Even her father, Donovan, had been kind and affectionate. But everything changed the day Morella successfully manifested her aura. Reiju had noticed immediately how their father's happiness became entirely focused on Morella, leaving her in the shadows. The servants began whispering behind her back, their gossip filling the corridors. "Lady Morella's aura has appeared," one maid had exclaimed, while another whispered in a worried tone, "But what about Lady Reiju?" That moment marked a turning point in Reiju's life. Her father's attitude toward her shifted dramatically, becoming cold and disdainful. He would harshly demand to know why she couldn't manifest an aura. Meanwhile, Morella seized every opportunity to mock her, cruelly reminding her that people like her were called colorless, a term that made Reiju feel even more isolated and worthless. In the present, Morella pushed the bottle of medicine toward Reiju once more, her insistence growing more forceful. As anxiety gnawed at her, Reiju became convinced that something was off about the liquid inside. She stammered, trying to reason with Morella, saying that their father would be in trouble if she died. Morella's response was chilling. With a twisted smile, she assured Reiju that she wouldn't die, but then, almost casually, she added that they shouldn't worry too much about how others perceived them. The sinister grin on Morella's face sent a wave of terror through Reiju, who suddenly realized with horror that her sister truly intended to kill her this time. Panic surged through Reiju as she scrambled backward, desperately trying to escape. When she saw a brief opening, she bolted for the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, Morella's furious scream echoed through the room, vowing that she wouldn't let Reiju get away. Reiju raced up the stairs, her eyes locked on a door ahead, through which bright light was spilling. A spark of hope ignited in her heart. The outside she thought with a surge of relief. But just as she reached for the door, something cold wrapped around her leg. A green aura coiled around her, stopping her in her tracks. Shocked, Reiju turned to see her father standing there, his expression as cold as ice. His voice, devoid of any warmth, cut through the air as he demanded to know what she was doing outside. Fear engulfed Reiju, and she realized with dread that this was the end. Morella, quick to spin her lies, immediately accused Reiju of going mad and trying to harm her. The accusation sent their father into a rage. Terrified, Reiju tried to explain herself, but before she could get the words out, her father's aura violently hurled her across the room. Without a moment's hesitation, he threw her back into her prison-like cell. Her vision blurred as she watched her father and Morella walk away, his voice echoing down the hallway, telling her to stay there and reflect on her actions. He promised that her punishment would come the next day. Left alone in the cold cell, Reiju felt the crushing weight of despair. She wondered if this was truly the end, if she was really going to die this time. Her body ached, and her mind raced with fear and hopelessness. But just then, a soft, otherworldly voice called out to her, urging her to awaken. Startled, Reiju opened her eyes, confused. Something strange was happening. Her entire body began to glow with an ethereal light. She hadn't died after all. Instead, she had somehow gained the ability to project her spirit outside her physical form. Her spirit floated above her bloodied body, and before she could fully understand what was happening, a mysterious man with black hair appeared. He gently took her hand, his voice warm and filled with tenderness as he spoke of how he had longed to see her. "My angel," he called her softly. Little did Reiju know that this moment would mark the beginning of being courted by an imperial prince. As her spirit floated above her lifeless body, the truth became clear: she had died. Reflecting on her life, she felt surprisingly detached from it, with no strong emotions binding her to her past existence. Yet, there was one lingering wish: to see the outside world one last time. Filled with sadness, she wandered through the ethereal space, her hand brushing lightly against the walls of the room. To her shock, her hand passed through the wall. Flinching, she hesitated before trying again, this time pushing her hand completely through. Realizing that in this state, no one could perceive her, Reiju embraced her newfound freedom. She flew to places she had only dreamed of: the town, the sea, the mountains. She explored everything she had once longed to see but had been denied in life. After her curiosity was finally satisfied, she resigned herself to her fate, waiting quietly for death to fully claim her. As she lingered in this ethereal state, a small bird unexpectedly landed on her hand. Startled, Rager realized she could actually feel it. Surprised that the bird might be able to perceive her, she took a closer look and noticed that the bird was injured. Her heart sank. Concerned, she gently asked if it was in pain, apologizing for her inability to help. Tears welled in her eyes as she berated herself, feeling utterly useless both in life and in death. She believed, just as her father and everyone else had, that she was worthless. But the bird chirped loudly, as if in protest of her self-deprecation. Taken aback, Rager realized the bird was angry on her behalf. A faint smile touched her lips as she thanked the little creature for its strange yet comforting gesture. Determined to do something, however small, in her final moments, she knelt and began to pray for the bird, hoping it would find relief. As her consciousness began to fade, something miraculous happened. A radiant glow surrounded her body, and an aura began to emerge from within her. To her astonishment, the bird's wounds started healing under the light of her aura. Raja watched in disbelief as the bird, now fully healed, flew into the air, chirping excitedly. It twirled in the sky and tugged at her clothing, urging her to follow. Confused but curious, Raju followed the bird as it led her to a tree. There, perched on a branch, the bird continued chirping insistently. Peering around the tree, Raju was shocked to find an injured rabbit lying in the grass, its wounds shimmering faintly. She quickly understood the bird's intent: it wanted her to heal the rabbit as well. Though she hesitated briefly, the bird's urgent chirping spurred her into action. Raju focused her newfound aura once again, and as the healing light enveloped the rabbit, its wounds vanished. The rabbit sprang to its feet and darted away into the woods, fully recovered. Raju watched the scene unfold, overwhelmed with surprise and wonder. Addressing the bird, she spoke with a sense of awe. Despite being a noble who had never possessed an aura, let alone such power, she had somehow gained this extraordinary ability. She pondered why it had manifested now, after her death. The bird nuzzled her cheek, offering silent comfort. Raja speculated that perhaps this was the Creator's way of giving her a chance to be useful, even if only in these final moments. With renewed purpose, she recalled a time when she had visited the capital and seen a woman who appeared gravely ill. Though unsure if her power could help a human, she felt compelled to try. Determined, Raja resolved to travel to the manor where the sick lady resided, hoping to offer her assistance. She turned to the bird and asked if it would accompany her. The bird chirped cheerfully in response, signaling its willingness to join her. A surge of happiness filled Raju's heart as she prepared to embark on this new mission. Meanwhile, at the manor, the lady coughed violently, her condition worsening by the minute. Her son, Denzel, looked on with deep worry, pleading with her to hold on just a little longer. The lady, however, expressed her sorrow, feeling her strength slipping away. Denzel's heart ached as he watched his mother suffer, desperate to save her but powerless to do anything. Denzel clutched his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face as he pleaded with her not to leave him. In a moment of desperation, he called out for a doctor, but before anyone could respond, Raju silently stepped forward. Using her newfound aura, she began to heal the lady. Miraculously, warmth spread through the woman's body, and she gradually felt better. In a moment of astonishment, she sprang from her bed, feeling lighter and more revitalized than she had in years. Denzel was overcome with joy and disbelief. He hugged his mother tightly, expressing his immense relief and astonishment at her sudden recovery. The lady, equally amazed, attributed her healing to a golden light sent by the Creator. Denzel, still reeling from the shock, joined her in thanking the Creator for restoring his mother's health and bringing happiness back into their lives. From outside the window, Raju watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with emotion. She had brought joy and healing to Denzel and his mother, and seeing their happiness brought tears to her own eyes. The servants, moved by the sight of their mistress's miraculous recovery, wept in shared joy. Raju, overwhelmed by the profound impact of her actions, felt tears stream down her face as well. With a heart full of gratitude, she flew away from the manor, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Excited by the possibilities her newfound powers offered, Reiju turned to the bird that had accompanied her and asked if it believed she could make a difference. The bird chirped cheerfully in response before flying off, leaving Reiju to wave a fond goodbye. Meanwhile, far away from the town, in an abandoned castle, a man bound by chains was revealed to be Claude Lopez de Lavine, the first prince of the Zograf Empire, the same black-haired man who had gently held Reiju's hand earlier in her astral form. The scene shifted to a busy marketplace where a young boy sat crying from an injury to his leg. Reiju arrived, invisible to those around her, and with a gentle touch, she used her aura to heal the boy's wound. The boy stopped crying, looking around in awe, as if sensing her presence. Although no one could see her, the boy felt her kindness and thanked her, calling her a lady angel with deep gratitude. Reiju, touched by his words, felt a shy smile spread across her face. His joy at being healed filled her with warmth. Back at the manor, Morella awoke and heard her maid excitedly recounting rumors of a figure known as the Lady Angel. While styling Morella's hair, the maid explained with great enthusiasm that this mysterious Lady Angel had become the talk of the town. She was said to heal anyone, whether rich or poor, leaving behind a trail of golden aura. Many believed she was an angel from the world's creation myths, hence the affectionate title. Morella, listening intently, mused aloud about the possibility of such a being visiting their home. With feigned concern, she asked the maid if the Lady Angel might be able to cure her sister's colorlessness. The maid, touched by what she perceived as Morella's kindness, responded positively, saying that such a heartfelt wish might indeed reach the Lady Angel. However, beneath Morella's outward show of concern, a sharp pang of jealousy stirred. She thought bitterly that she alone should be called an angel, irritated that this so-called Lady Angel had gained such admiration. From that day forward, Reiju traveled from town to town, healing the sick and the injured. However, she was soon made aware of the limitations of her power. She estimated she could only heal 2 more people before needing to return to her physical body. The time she could spend in her spirit form was limited, and with each person she healed, she felt herself drawn back to her physical form sooner. During her first return to her body, Reiju had been completely bewildered by the experience. Seeing her own motionless body, she had been unsure whether she had truly made any progress. It was then that she realized her aura could not be used while in her physical form, it only manifested when she was in her spirit state. Reiju silently thanked the Creator for granting her the ability to heal, even if it was only in her spirit form. One day, as she flew away from town, her attention was drawn to an abandoned castle. Curiosity guided her inside, where she was shocked to discover the first prince, Claude Lopez de Lavine, lying in a severely injured state. Concerned for his well-being, Reiju approached him and used her golden aura to begin healing him. As she watched his wounds mend, a sense of relief and happiness filled her. Once healed, Claude stood up and began inspecting his body for any lingering injuries. As he stripped off his clothes to check himself more thoroughly, Reiju, overwhelmed by the sudden and unexpected situation, felt a rush of shyness and quickly turned her face away. Confused, she wondered why some of his injuries still remained despite her efforts to heal him completely. As she reached out to offer more healing, she froze when Claude looked at her with a stern expression and asked if she was the rumored angel. Reiju was shocked. How could he see her? She had always believed she was invisible in her spirit form. This unexpected revelation left her baffled and anxious. After returning to her physical body, she gasped, realizing that her aura had run out. Troubled by the fact that Claude could perceive her and distressed over the injury she had failed to heal, she resolved to go back once her aura had regenerated to check on him and ensure his safety, even if communicating with him proved difficult. However, when she returned to the castle, she was horrified to find Claude being tormented by another man. The man, using his aura to inflict pain, demanded to know how Claude's wounds had healed. Reiju, watching from the shadows, felt helpless and terrified. She realized the man tormenting Claude must be a transcendent, one of the rare individuals blessed by the Creator with powerful auras that could be manipulated more effectively than ordinary nobles. Her father had the same ability, so she knew the danger Claude was in. The man taunted Claude, mocking him about the angel who had healed him, and said the punishment was all the more satisfying because of it. Reiju, paralyzed by fear and guilt, hid behind a wall, feeling responsible for the beating Claude was enduring. When the man finally left, Reju, overwhelmed with concern, approached Claude with the intention of healing him again. But before she could act, the man's cruel words replayed in her mind, blaming the angel for causing the trouble. Reju felt a wave of remorse wash over her. Tears streamed down her face as she quietly cried, apologizing for what had happened, believing it was her fault. Hearing her voice, Claude, despite his injuries, managed to sit up, startling Reju. Curious, she asked if he could truly see her. Claude explained that he couldn't actually see her, but he could hear her voice and sense her presence through her aura. He revealed that their first encounter had been a coincidence. His sensitivity to auras had allowed him to detect her, even though she remained invisible to his eyes. Reju began to speak again, starting with a hesitant but Claude interrupted her. With a cold tone, he instructed her not to come near him anymore. He admitted that he didn't fully understand who or what she was, but after what had happened, it was clear to him that she was a nuisance. Reju was taken aback by his harsh words. Tears welled in her eyes as she apologized again, her heart heavy with sorrow. But Claude, while still firm, told her there was no need for her to keep apologizing and urged her to leave. As Reju walked away, deeply saddened by his rejection, Claude added that it was enough that she had pitied him once. As she moved through the hallway, Reju reflected on Claude's words. Though his reaction stung, she acknowledged that her actions might have been thoughtless. She hadn't fully understood the consequences of intervening in his life, and now she realized that his frustration was justified. Despite Claude's situation reflecting her own past struggles, Reju couldn't bring herself to abandon him. Even if her feelings were mixed with pity, she was determined to help him find happiness. Driven by that desire, she resolved to do whatever she could to protect him. Suddenly, Reju noticed the man who had beaten Claude earlier speaking to someone. Apologizing for the intrusion, the man reported that he had urgent news regarding the first prince. A commanding voice from inside the room instructed him to proceed. Hidden nearby, Reju listened carefully. The man reported that the rumored angel had visited the first prince, healing all the scars from his punishment. The lady seated before him acknowledged the angel's compassion but asked about the current state of the prince. The man responded that there had been no significant changes. The woman, revealed to be Empress Nadine Miles Delavine of the Zograph Empire, smirked and declared that despite the savior's power, Claude's condition remained unchanged, making it the perfect time for their plan. Excitement flashed in the man's eyes as he confirmed they were ready to move forward with the plan to assassinate the first prince. Empress Nadine coldly asserted that the empire had no need for two princes. Hiding behind the wall, Reju's heart pounded. Anxiety filled her as she realized Claude was in grave danger. Claude Lopez de Lavine, the first prince, had been born with a rare black aura, a phenomenon so uncommon it might not occur even once in a century. However, despite his unique aura, Claude had failed to achieve transcendence, a coveted status more important than birth order when determining the right to succession. As the first prince but not a transcendent, Claude was seen as a bearer of bad luck, his fate sealed from birth. Maids gossiped about the prince's tragic circumstances. They whispered about how Prince Claude had been locked away, not solely because he failed to become a transcendent, but because of the circumstances surrounding his birth. His mother, the former empress, had sacrificed her life to bring him into the world. The emperor, who had loved her deeply, blamed Claude for her death and resented his very existence. One maid expressed her frustration, remarking that it was wrong for the emperor to use this as an excuse to overlook the current empress's deeds. Her companion quickly hushed her, cautioning against speaking too openly about such delicate matters. But the gossip didn't stop. Another maid remarked that Prince Claude's so-called training was nothing more than thinly disguised abuse, a fact that made her uncomfortable. Her peer, still nervous, urged her to stop talking, reminding her that they didn't know who might be listening. The first maid brushed off the concern, pointing out that hardly anyone ever ventured to that part of the castle. Unbeknownst to them, Reju had been silently listening to the entire conversation. With each word, her concern for Claude deepened. She now understood the full extent of his isolation and suffering. The maids ended their gossip and resumed their duties, but Reju stayed behind, processing everything she had heard. The current empress's son, Prince Nicholas, was a transcendent, and it was almost certain that he would ascend to the throne without any interference. Reiju couldn't help but wonder why Empress Nadine despised Prince Claude so much that she was plotting to have him assassinated. After all, Nicholas's future as emperor was already secure. What more could she want? With a chilling smirk, Empress Nadine casually mentioned to her accomplice, Norman, that Nicholas would be returning from the academy in 2 weeks. She proposed that on that day, the brothers would meet, and on that day, Prince Claude would meet his end. Norman, though momentarily hesitant, asked if it was wise to involve Prince Nicholas in such a scheme. The Empress, completely unbothered, affirmed that Nicholas needed to understand the harsh realities of being the next emperor. According to her, this assassination plot was a necessary part of his realization. Norman nodded in agreement, and the Empress instructed him to continue with Claude's brutal training until the appointed day, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. Overhearing the sinister plot to assassinate Claude only strengthened Reiju's resolve. She couldn't stand by and let him die, not when she felt so compelled to protect him, even if he saw her as nothing more than a nuisance. Driven by this deep sense of responsibility, she returned to his side. As soon as Reiju arrived, Claude sensed her presence. His voice, laced with irritation, asked why she had come back, reminding her that he could always detect her aura. Reiju remained silent, unsure of how to respond, her heart heavy with concern. Claude, unimpressed by her lack of response, scoffed and dismissed her, turning his back on her presence. He began to strip off his shirt, intending to examine his injuries, causing Reiju to panic. Blushing furiously, she quickly averted her gaze, feeling flustered and unsure of how to handle the situation. Despite her embarrassment, she couldn't help but notice the countless scars and fresh wounds marking his body. The sight tugged at her heart. Though she knew she should look away, modesty was overpowered by her concern for him. She desperately wanted to help, even if only a little. As she hesitantly moved closer to offer her aid, Claude suddenly spoke, calling out sharply, making her freeze in place. For a moment, they were so close that it almost felt like a scene from a romantic story, an intimacy Reiju hadn't expected. Embarrassed by her own thoughts, Reiju flushed, heart pounding, and dashed away in a rush, her mind swirling with confusion. She hadn't meant to get that close. Even after flying off in a flurry of emotions, her thoughts remained with Claude. Although he might never trust her, she couldn't bring herself to leave him completely. Reiju made a quiet decision: she would watch over him in secret, offering him what little help she could, until the day he could trust her. From that moment on, she began to visit him in secret. Whenever the Empress's aide would come to abuse or torment Claude, Reiju would discreetly use her aura to ease his pain, even if only a little. Often, she arrived late at night, struggling with sleeplessness, but she always made sure his wounds weren't too severe before leaving. One evening, after confirming that his injuries weren't as bad as before, she sighed in relief. But then, suddenly, she heard Claude whimper in his sleep. Concern shot through her as she realized he was trapped in a nightmare. For a moment, she debated whether her aura could soothe him, but she hesitated, unsure if using her power would accidentally heal all his wounds, which could raise suspicion. Torn between wanting to help and fearing the consequences, she stood frozen, watching helplessly as he thrashed in distress. Then, faintly, Claude murmured something in his sleep, "Mother." The word startled her, cutting through the silence with raw emotion. Before she could think, Claude woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat and struggling to breathe. His distress was too much for Reiju to bear. Unable to hold back any longer, she rushed toward him and embraced him, gently using her aura to calm him. Claude, initially shocked by the sudden comfort, gradually began to relax as her soothing power washed over him. His breathing steadied, and the tension in his body melted away. Softly, Reiju reassured him, her voice barely above a whisper, telling him that everything would be all right. As she felt his body finally calm down, a sense of relief washed over her. But then, without warning, Claude suddenly called out, startling her. In a panic, she leapt back, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had no idea what to say or how to explain herself, feeling overwhelmed by the awkwardness of the moment. Claude, equally confused, scratched his head, unsure of what had just happened. Before he could say anything, Reiju, completely flustered, mumbled an apology and fled from the room. Still dazed, Claude muttered to himself, wondering aloud what in the world had just transpired. The next day, Reiju found herself hiding behind a wall, her cheeks still flushed as she replayed the previous night's encounter over and over in her mind. She was mortified by her actions but tried to justify it to herself. After all, it wasn't as though Claude could actually see what she had been doing. Still, the memory made her heart race with embarrassment. Peeking around the corner, she felt a small wave of relief when she saw him sleeping peacefully. But her relief was short-lived. Suddenly, Claude's body tensed, his expression twisting in pain. Concern surged through her again, and she instinctively moved closer, her heart aching at the sight of his suffering. Raja realized how much pain he must have endured alone, both physically and emotionally, all this time. Wanting nothing more than to ease his burden, she gently hugged him once more, using her aura to calm his body and bring him peace. As his breathing evened out and his face relaxed, Raja smiled softly, feeling a profound sense of happiness. He was finally at peace, even if just for a moment. From then on, every time she visited him, she prayed for his heart to find comfort. After a few days, Raja stopped worrying about whether he was asleep or awake.